Welcome to today's Partner Academy Live on-demand webcast. This session is titled Visual Studio 2010, Understanding Software Testing to Boost Sales, Reseller Training. I would like to turn the floor over to your presenter today, Michael Deroche, Vice President and Director, Tiempo Testing Labs. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is the second session in the series for the resellers for 2010 Visual Studio Testing Solutions. The first session was a look at the software testing marketplace. So if you have an opportunity to pick up that session, it does provide some foundation and fundamental understanding for this session, but this should also stand on its own for you to understand what we're talking about. So today's session is looking at the world of software testing. With the introduction of Visual Studio 2010, we have an entirely new set of tools that are now available for the software tester and for the software testing industry. But the software testing industry has largely flown under the radar for many people that have been in the software engineering field for some time, especially in sales and marketing. They're very familiar with selling to developers and to upper management, but not as familiar with selling testing tools. And so the introduction of the testing tools in Visual Studio 2010 is a terrific opportunity and a hugely untapped marketplace. So this session will provide a basic understanding of software testing concepts. My attempt will be not to be too pedantic, assuming that a certain familiarity with software testing, but in large part we'll be covering some of the basic concepts and providing a fundamental and a foundational understanding so that you will understand better how to converse with your clients and your prospects regarding software testing and specifically how Visual Studio can meet their needs. So there'll be four primary areas that we'll look at in this session. The first is the new tester-centric design in Visual Studio. Then we'll back up a bit and speak more in general about what is software testing, what does the software testing world looks like, who is the software tester, and what is their place in the whole scheme of software engineering. And then finally wrap it up with why is it Visual Studio such a good match for this marketplace. So when you start talking about testing, you realize that testing covers the gamut of a software engineering activity, and there's not one single set of business needs that testing represents, because it represents in multiple segments and many stakeholders, which each have a subsegment of needs and interests. And going after the testing market, because it is not a single marketplace with a single audience, the problem and the need is going to be understanding the various constituents, the various stakeholders in that market, and also using the terminology that is commonplace within the software testing world. And as I had mentioned, this is a terrific opportunity because with the introduction of Visual Studio 2010, there is a game-changing element in that it is going after a subset of the testing market that generally has not been well served by the tools in the market today. So we'll be covering that in a fair amount of depth as we go through the session today. First, you can see that the world of Visual Studio is extraordinarily expansive, and my job today is specifically to talk about the testing aspects. And so if you look at the little square box under the Visual Studio banner, you see Test Professional, and that is primarily the software and the capabilities that we'll be looking at. However, there are some of the testing capabilities within the tool that are encompassed in Ultimate that we'll make some reference to, all based on the Team Foundation server and the lab management deployment. So based on the prior comments, the game-changing element of Visual Studio is the fact that it is now addressing the testing that happens in the manual space. There's in the software testing world, there's the manual tester, which is in this graphic known as a generalist, and they're the ones that includes most of the activities that are done by most of the testers in today's world. They go by job titles such as functional analyst or user acceptance tester, business analyst, software tester, QA analyst, a variety of terms, but in general they're describing the manual tester, the person whose job it is to find bugs. That person is we're going to describe in this session in some detail, and you'll get to know them pretty well, I think. 70%, it's an estimate, but it's generally held that at least that much of the testing of today's applications are done on a manual basis. It's not because there are not very good automated tools available. It's simply because that most of the defects found are found as a part of a manual test. And so there's no way to eliminate or to eradicate the need for manual testing. Automation is a terrific tool and a terrific technology, but it has a specific set of areas that it works the best in, and we'll get into what those areas are during the session as well. And so if a tool could address the needs of the 70%, to provide them a way to make their job easier, to find defects more quickly, and to have a better interaction with the entire team, that would be a game changer. And that is what Visual Studio 2010 accomplishes, by providing tools for the manual tester. And so we'll be looking at that. And that is a key component in providing value to your clients and helping them to understand how it is that Visual Studio 2010 can help them. So from the manual up to the specialist. And the specialists are those that are doing the coded UI tests, and that would be the testing components within Visual Studio Ultimate. And then you see, if you work backwards, the majority of test tools, excuse me, are in the scripting skill category. This would be the test automation, some of the performance engineering, and the load testing. And those are done by, in general, probably about 1 in 10 of testers would be in those areas, and the rest would be in the automation skill set or in the coded UI, and the balance being in the manual testers. So this slide basically addresses and points out that the test-centric capabilities within Visual Studio 2010 are going to be what is going to be driving much of the excitement for the test industry. There are five primary benefits that we see within this tool, and some of these were covered more in depth in the prior session, but I show them here just so that we have a good foundation to work from. In Visual Studio 2010 for test, there is now a comprehensive and shared management across the entire software team. And the reason this is so powerful is that the testers prior to this piece of software, and in many companies, are siloed. They do not share the same data. They don't share the same defects, the same reporting mechanisms across the engineering teams. They often work off of a Word or an Excel spreadsheet that's passed around. But those walls are broken down in this tool and enabled to share all the test artifacts as well as the development artifacts across the teams. The second is the ability to easily create reproducible and actionable bugs. Now, those terms you're going to be hearing quite a bit over the course of this session, the reproducible and actionable. You'll also hear a term called no repro bugs. And what we're speaking of, it's very common, and it's a frustration for the testers for them to find a defect or a bug and then have the developer unable to recreate it. And it causes friction and misunderstanding often between the individuals. And this tools and the capabilities in Visual Studio 2010 enable the testers and the developer to easily recreate and reproduce the bug. And they do that in a number of ways, which we'll get into a later part of this presentation. But in brief, it allows both the attachment of screenshots and tracking mechanisms through IntelliTrace, as well as a very rich set of debugging capabilities that are captured along when the defect has been captured. The third is that there's a rich reporting analysis and metrics, and that speaks for itself, but it's been greatly enhanced so that there's very terrific reporting, and this is especially appreciated by the upper management. They can see exactly where the testing effort is, which has been for so long just been fairly obscure and invisible. The fourth is an advanced manual and automated testing with lab management capabilities. Now, this fourth capability, besides the manual and automated testing, there's the introduction of the lab management capabilities. Customers today that are using physical machines to recreate environments are terrific candidates for this piece of software, simply because we're now able to reduce the time-consuming and costly activity by creating a virtual machine and virtual labs in order to create environments that software testing can take place. So no longer is there going to have to be provisioning of a physical machine, but now there's going to be the ability to, within the development and within the test space, create those virtual environments to quickly capture and recreate those bugs. So that's a terrific and amazing capability of the tool, and one that is going to be highly welcomed by the test community. Till now, provisioning in the test environments have been a very time-consuming process. So this is a terrific boon to the testing folks. And then the last is state-of-art debugging and tracing with IntelliTrace. And some of these things I mentioned, as if you're familiar with them, and I'm assuming that there's some degree of familiarity. All of the things that we're talking about today are available on the websites with more in-depth technical definitions for you to take a look at. Okay, so the next slide, and this is one of the main components of this session, is describing what exactly software testing is. Maybe before the session you figured that software had to be tested, but didn't really understand that there's a whole world built around software testing. And in fact, there is. It's a whole culture of folks that are only involved with software testing. They don't care to be software developers. They don't want to be managers. They want to be software testers. And there are thousands of books written on the subject, some of them in complete opposition with each other. But it's the nature of the software testing group that there's a wide variety of opinions on how best to develop computer software that is of high quality and free of defects. There's conferences that go on all over the world for software testers. Many of these conferences are specific for the more specialist type of tester, and that's why Visual Studio 2010 is going to be such a big hit. It addresses the needs of the general tester. These conferences are Star East, Star West, Eurostar, and others. There's certifications that software testers get.